Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is Solo Leveling, Season 1, Episode 1, I'm Used to It. Episode in a nutshell is a brief reminder of what happens in the episode. So we begin this episode with a flashback to a raid that happened on Jeju Island 3 years previous, and are introduced to some of the S ranks that participated in that raid. Before we then move on to the main character, who is getting ready to enter a D rank dungeon, and we hear some of the other hunters gossiping about how he is the weakest hunter in the lowest E rank category, and therefore when he shows up, everybody's really happy to see him because it means that the dungeon is going to be easy pickings, though obviously not for the main character, Sung Jin Woo. We also learn more about the Hunter Association, its leader, the way that it tests hunters, and some of the uses for the things that are found in dungeons. And this is interspersed with the raid where Sung Jin Woo basically almost dies for the lowest quality monster core essence stone, whatever you'd like to call it, which is not worth a lot. But we do learn that he is risking everything despite the low reward, because the low reward is still better than what he would make at a regular job, and his father's missing, his mother's in the hospital, and then his sister needs to go to college, so he basically has to work for all of those things. And after they defeat the initial monsters of the dungeon, and we've been introduced to everybody who's raiding with them, we then discover that the dungeon has a second part known as a double dungeon, and that's a rare phenomenon, and they take a vote, decide to go ahead and, because it's in a D rank dungeon, challenge this double dungeon despite the risks that it may be a higher level than the previous D rank dungeon. And when they arrive, they see a lot of statues, a really large statue in the center, and then one of the statues is holding a list of commandments, which they don't really understand at first. One of the people decides to leave. He ends up killed. Then, at the last moment, after we get some flashbacks to all of the life and death situations that Sung Jin Woo has been through, we find out that his instincts are finally honed for dangerous situations, and as he looks at the big statue, he sees the eyes not only move but start to glow, tells everybody to get down, and those who didn't get down in time are burned by lasers from the statue's eyes, and everybody panicking about that is essentially where we leave this episode off. So now that we've been reminded about what happens in the episode, we'll now rank the episode, and as always, we'll rank on our mostly objective ranking list, which uses set values to determine the score, and those values are applied to key storytelling elements, both positive and negative, in order to decide how the episode stacks up mostly objectively. Because we're not using any emotion or entertainment value or opinion in it, it's mostly objective. However, bias and judgment can still apply, as I am the one who is deciding which of the key storytelling elements apply to the episode. And then the second ranking list is, of course, the personal ranking list, and that is based purely on my emotional response, opinion, and entertainment value that the episode gave to me personally. So it's basically what I think the episode should be worth, regardless of storytelling elements and anything else. It's purely opinion. So we'll start with our mostly objective rank values. And the first is the multi-episode supporting character introductions. And there were a lot, some of which are preemptive. So Solo Leveling, of course, started as a manhwa, and some of these characters didn't come in until several chapters in, but have been preemptively introduced thanks to the flashback. And so we have Yeon-suk, who dies in the Jeju Island raid, though that's not shown yet in the brief flashback that we got this time. So I'm assuming it's coming later, which is why he's multi-episode. Then we have Kim Sang-shik, who is part of the raid team for the D-rank dungeon, as well as Park Byung-shik, Lee Joo-hee, Kang Jung-ho, Song Chi-yul, and Ju Jae-hwan, which are all, again, the raid teams for the D-rank dungeon. Then we have multi-season supporting character introductions, and we have Min Byung-gyu, Baekhyun-ho, Choi Jong-in, Go Gun-hee, Woo Jin-chul, and Cha Hae-in, who are the S ranks. Min Byung-gyu, Baek Yeon-hoo, and Choi Jong-in were at the raid, and they are also guild masters. Baek and Choi are guild masters. Min was traumatized and is not currently there, but he does take part in a future arc, hence why he is going to be multi-season. Go Gun-hee and Woo Jin-chul are the chairman of the Hunters Association and his subordinate, and future chairman. And then Cha Hae-in is basically the female lead and an S rank who is part of Choi Jong-in's guild. Then we have our multi-season main character introduction, which is Sung Jin-ho. Or no, Sung Jin-woo. Oh my goodness, I can't believe I got that wrong. I was looking at a different name. Anyway, Sung Jin-woo is the main character, and we only have one main character in this series, in my opinion, because it is called Solo Leveling. So he will solely, on his own, be leveling. And so I consider everybody else at most a multi-season supporting character. He's the main character. His direct minions, spoilers for the future, I may consider also main characters, but essentially he's the only one that's in that spot. Then we have, of course, the premise establishment, which establishes the entire world and the lore around it. So 10 years previously, a bunch of dungeons opened up. People then gained powers. Infrastructure was put into place to measure the powers, hence the rankings. There is no leveling system built into it. Once you awaken your entire power, and it never increases no matter what you do and what effort you put in. Additionally, the drops from dungeon monsters can be turned into weapons as well as energy sources, etc., etc. And this is, of course, worth a lot of money, which then leads to the hunters being quite wealthy, and they gain this wealth at the risk of going into dungeons and potentially passing away there, so on and so forth. So we're essentially learning about the world and the system, which the hunters all live in while we follow through the first few chapters of the manhwa. And then we have the only negative from this episode, objectively, is the negative messaging or behavior, which is, of course, the disregard for safety rules. Obviously, in the workplace, rules are put in place to keep workers safe, and anybody who has ever had a job ever has probably gone through workplace safety training, because it is incredibly important to avoid unnecessary death and risk to yourself. And frankly speaking, the proper procedure when they found a double dungeon was to leave the dungeon, go to the Hunters Association, have them send people in to look at that dungeon and determine whether it was safe. But because of their greed, they didn't want the interlopers, the Hunters Association, coming in and taking their rewards, so they then decide to go into it And it turns out there aren't even monsters there aren't treasures waiting. Instead, it is essentially a death trap. And that's what you get for disregarding safety rules in the workplace, which for hunters, the dungeons are their workplace. So, minus 2 points for that. However, because of all the characters introduced, especially the fact that there were a lot of high-ranking characters that were preemptively introduced, um, we're well above 10. Like, I didn't even calculate it because there's no possibility of it being below 10. It's obviously over 10, and 10 is the highest score that is possible on any episode. And so, 10 out of 10 for this first episode. Of course, it is the only episode in the current season, so our season ranking so far has I'm Used to It in first place. Likewise, on the personal ranking, I'm Used to It is in first place. However, my score for it is much different than the objective ranking list, and there is a reason for that. I really hated the start of this manhwa, and I don't really enjoy it even in anime format. I know the whole point is that he starts weak, gets his cheat skill at the end of his trauma, and then just grows and grows and grows into an awesome, overpowered, very exciting to watch character. And I'm looking forward to that, and I love that part of the show. I'm not overly fond of the weak start. I really am not. The only reason I gave it a score as high as I did is because they did do a bit more premise establishment, preemptively introduce some characters, do that flashback, and add more into it than just this character is so weak that they step into a dungeon and almost die, and then are foolish enough, because of external pressures, to then risk their life again in something that potentially they might again die in that's even stronger. And he's the deciding vote, so he made the choice to do that. And then, of course, everybody panics, they scream. He has some undignified facial expressions and behaviors, of course. So this episode and the next one, not my favorite, but it gets so much better after that I'm willing to put up with it. Honestly, I almost never read the original manhwa because of how badly it started, and I was just so completely disinterested in it. But I have a rule to give everything a chance, to read past like the first arc of any story to see if it gets better, and thank goodness I did, because it turned out it's one of my most reread manhwas and one of my favorite manhwas. So obviously I also love the anime, but I only gave the first episode a 5, and again, the only reason it got that high is because of the additional flashback, Hunter Association, premise establishment stuff, but not because of the main character or this particular dungeon, because again, I don't like it. I never did, and I don't like the weak stage. I want to get to the strong stage. So, 5 out of 10, I'm Used to It is in first place. Bringing us now to the series ranking so far, where we'll rank each of the seasons against each other, of which there are only 2 so far. Season 1 so far, with this episode, 10 out of a possible 120. Personal ranking, so far, 5 out of a possible 120. And with that, we've now rewatched and ranked Solo Leveling Season 1, Episode 1. I'm Used to It. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.